Firstly, I would like to apologize. If I sound a little out of breath, it's because I just did 200 push-ups and came from the gym. Because Zack Snyder's Justice League is coming out. Yes, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what that means. Only a Zack Snyder movie can create that kind of raging testosterone, the chest-pounding, vein-popping action. Zack Snyder's Justice League is coming out after years of the world's most annoying hashtag. Okay, it's time to get serious. Welcome back to The Long Take. It's been a year, and we're back. And we're once again talking about Zachary Edward Snyder. Let's get to it. Today, Wednesday, May 20th, 2020, it was announced that Zack Snyder's Justice League will in fact be hitting HBO Max sometime next year. The announcement came following a screening / watch-along party of Man of Steel on Vero, of course, because only Zack Snyder uses Vero, where he announced that he will be finishing a cut of Justice League that is going to be considered the director's cut. Now, this news brings a lot to the table in terms of discussion, but the first of which I am just going to throw it out there. This proves all along that the Snyder Cut never existed. I was correct. I was always right. The Snyder Cut never existed. At least not in the term that many of his fans thought it did. The way that they petitioned for the release of the Snyder Cut, they believed that Warner Brothers was somehow taking part in some elaborate conspiracy to suppress the true version of Justice League. They thought that this completely finished, alternate cut of Justice League was somehow just sitting there in the Warner Brothers vault, and they refused to put it out. That's clearly not what happened, because Zack Snyder never finished his Justice League. And it is reportedly going to take a budget of $20 million to finish his cut, which will include visual effects, scoring, and edits. So this tells me that the movie was never finished. It was just a bunch of storyboards and concept art that Snyder kept teasing on his Vero to fan the flame of the Snyder Cut movement and to sort of rile up the fans. There was never a version of Justice League that is what everybody thought it was. There was never a version of Justice League where Darkseid was in the movie, where it was 3.5 hours long. And there was all this stuff that was supposedly cut. That never happened. It was never a movie, because it was never made. And if you bothered to read the reports of this whole controversy when this news broke, I feel like most people would know that. But the point is that Zack Snyder's version of Justice League was never completed. They are paying $20 million to complete the film. And that's bold of Warner Brothers. I will give them that. That's unprecedented, and that is brave, to say the least. But at the same time, I can kind of understand why they're doing it. Think about the circumstances. We are currently in the midst of the worst pandemic in a century, and Hollywood has completely shut down. Theatrically released films have been completely halted. There is nothing in theaters right now. Everybody is relying on streaming services for entertainment. And not everybody is like Netflix, where they have original content coming out every week, no matter how good the quality of that content is. But this gives HBO Max a huge, and I mean a huge draw when this thing launches. I have to assume that because HBO Max is going to have Zack Snyder's Justice League, that its subscription numbers will go through the roof next year because of this movie alone. Because you have to think about it, you're getting all the subscriptions just to begin with, you're getting all of Snyder's fans. And then you have people like myself who were interested on a cinematic level. Now, I have a weird ambivalence towards this whole situation with Zack Snyder's Justice League, because I will admit that I am not a fan of his films at all. I do not like Snyder's work. I do not think he's a good director. And I hate his DC movies. I do not think they're good at all. I think they're actually insulting to the characters. I think Batman v Superman is the worst Hollywood production ever made relative to its expectations. But, that said, I would still, and I am going to, watch Zack Snyder's Justice League, and the reason for that is because I would much rather watch a 4-hour ambitious disaster than a 2-hour cookie-cutter safe studio product, which is what the theatrical cut of Justice League was. It was okay, but this was the first live-action Justice League film ever made, and the fact that it was only okay makes it bad. We're talking about the greatest superhero team in the history of comic books, and their movie was just okay. But Marvel managed to make The Avengers a movie full of a bunch of B-list superheroes, a cultural phenomenon, and then it turned into what we all know the MCU as today. They're doing that when they don't even own the rights to all of their characters, and DC can't even make it work with the 3 biggest characters in comic book history: Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. It doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense when you think of the man that they put in charge. Warner Brothers entrusted Zack Snyder with the entire DC universe, and that was a big mistake. That was a big mistake. I was not a fan of Man of Steel, and no, my opinion does not define the entire societal opinion of the DC extended universe. But what I am saying is I personally did not care for Man of Steel because Man of Steel was a movie that tried so hard to be dark and gritty and realistic that it completely lost the essence of the character of Superman. It tried so hard to be Batman Begins that it just fell completely on its face. The structure of the film was a disaster. The writing was bad. The direction was just immature and childish. And quite frankly, it was so awful to look at. It was so ugly. I know it's kind of a joke at this point, but Snyder's affinity for desaturating his imagery is just very, very strange, because it seems to me like that is the only way he knows how to convey a dark tone, because he cannot do it narratively. He can't do it by telling a story. He is incapable of saying, this is a dark story, and I'm going to show you by directing the film in such a way. No, in Zack Snyder's mind, this is a dark movie, therefore it must actually be dark, so let's just suck all the life out of the photography to where it doesn't even look like color photography. Man of Steel was not great, but I thought there were some interesting aspects about it, and I was interested to see where things were going to go. And then we got Batman vs. Superman, which is not only one of the worst movies I've ever seen, but I think it was definitely the worst blockbuster of the 2010s. Batman v Superman was a disgrace. It was a disgrace to 80 years worth of DC Comics. It was a disgrace to the character of Batman. It was a disgrace to the character of Superman. It was a disgrace to everything that Christopher Nolan built with the Dark Knight trilogy. It was a disgrace to what Richard Donner did with Superman. It was just awful. I have no other way to describe it. It was awful. I left the theater with my jaw on the floor, and not in a good way. Batman v Superman is a movie that is completely incomprehensible even to the most diehard DC fan. The biggest problem with Batman v Superman is you have a movie whose entire premise is predicated on the idea that you have a pre-existing knowledge of both of its main characters. But the movie wants to present those two main characters as so far removed from their iconic portrayals that said pre-existing knowledge actually works against your ability to follow the movie. It is mind-boggling. What the hell went wrong with that movie? The movie is so dark. It's so dark. And I don't care if a movie's dark. Tone in itself is never a problem. A movie can have a tonal dissonance, which is a problem with filmmaking. It can have tonal inconsistency, which is a problem with filmmaking. But tone by itself is not the problem. So you will never hear me say Batman v Superman is bad because it's dark. But it certainly doesn't help the movie because it is so soul-crushingly, existentially, depressingly dark that when you finish the movie, you feel like you've just gone to a funeral. And the biggest issue with the tone in that film is that it's so dark and self-serious that it almost renders itself as a parody of everything it wants to be serious about. It wants to deconstruct Batman and Superman, but Zack Snyder never bothered to develop either of those characters. You can't deconstruct something when you never bother to construct them. It doesn't work. Those two things are fundamentally and diametrically opposed. It does not work. You cannot take that approach with a film when you haven't earned that. You know, for example, Superman's death meant nothing. It had no emotional effect on anybody because Zack Snyder didn't earn it. The DC Extended Universe didn't earn it. Superman died on the big screen and nobody cared. That's something you have maybe one shot at in a lifetime, and they blew it. Batman v Superman really, really upset me, and yet I still held out the slightest bit of hope for Justice League. And then it was just okay. It was just okay. I wasn't offended by it like I was with Batman v Superman, but it wasn't good. It wasn't great, that's for sure. And then we get to the Snyder Cut. A movement started by abusive, toxic fanboys that led to harassment and bullying and whining all over the internet, including on Twitter. I was the ire of many, many angry Zack Snyder fans over the past several years, when I was just trying to have a constructive discussion about these movies, because I think that there is actually a lot wrong with Batman v Superman just based off the fundamentals of filmmaking. It is not a good movie. And I think there's a lot to discuss there. I wrote a 55-page paper for my creative writing class in 2017 on Batman v Superman. That's how much that movie bothers me. Yes, I know that's pathetic, but you know what? It is what it is. So the release of the Snyder Cut movie took off, and it led to a lot of bad behavior. But I will acknowledge that not everybody is like that, okay? Not for the Zack Snyder fans that were genuine people and they were nice about this movement, I'm happy for you. Good. Seriously. I'm glad that you're finally getting this film. My friend is a Zack Snyder fan. He enjoys his movies. He enjoys the DC Extended Universe. That's fine. Great. You know why? Because he doesn't treat me like I'm an idiot. He doesn't say that, oh, I'm just too stupid to understand the genius of Zack Snyder. No, I mean, we tease each other, but he doesn't treat me like I'm a lesser human being because I don't like Batman v Superman. That kind of behavior is not okay. So, in a way, this announcement of Zack Snyder's Justice League, I think it sets a dangerous precedent because you really have to start asking yourself, what does this say about the role of fans in filmmaking and art in general, really? Because you have things like this, and then you have things such as the remake The Last Jedi petition, which was so fucking stupid. And then you have, for instance, most recently, the Sonic the Hedgehog debacle, which people were arguing that the movie made $65 million because the filmmakers listened to the fans. You can't let fans dictate your artistic choices. If that becomes normalized, I think we're heading into very, very dangerous and very, quite frankly, watered down territory. We're going to start to get films that are, dictated by the fans rather than the voice of an artist, and I don't think that's good for anyone. I think that this sets a dangerous precedent in many ways because it kind of validates the toxic behavior of the majority of his fans. It's basically a message that says bullying and whining will get you what you want. So, just go ahead and do it. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's a good message to send. But you know what? I'm going to watch the movie because this is the good side of it, in my opinion. I think there is a benefit to releasing Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I think the benefit is obviously that we do get to see the vision of Zack Snyder. This movie will be 100% him. It will be unadulterated, free of any studio interference, free of any executive mandates. It is going to be 100% Zack Snyder's Justice League, and I think that's great. Zack Snyder is a very ambitious director. He takes some really big swings, and more often than not, they miss for me. But as I said earlier in the video, I would rather watch an ambitious disaster that falls flat on its face than a safe movie that's just okay and that I'll eventually forget about. I think it's good in a way because it's going to allow Zack Snyder to complete his vision. Now, I don't think it will be his complete vision because he's not going to get to make those Justice League sequels, which there was a lot of rumors about what those movies would have been about, and there's no way of telling which one was true and what was not true. So I'm not really going to get into that, but what I will say is that I think that this Justice League is going to be completely retooled. The Hollywood Reporter article that was released when Zack Snyder made the announcement said that it's going to be a completely new experience and unlike anything from the theatrical cut. So this makes me think that this isn't a sort of different take on the Justice League that we saw. I don't think it's going to be the same thing with Steppenwolf trying to get the 3 mother boxes, and I don't think that's going to be what this movie is. I think Snyder is going to try to wrap up his DC universe with this movie. I think he's going to go all in because the reports are this is either going to be a 4-hour-long movie or it's going to be split into 6 TV-style chapters. So the sheer length of this alone allows for a lot of room to develop things, whether it be narratively or character work. And I think that Zack Snyder is going to go for it all. I think he's going to try to wrap up the entire DC Extended Universe because he knows that they're not going to bring him back. And I don't know that that's a good thing because he's not a very competent storyteller. I'm sorry, but he's not. I think if he were, then Batman v Superman would not have turned out the way that it did. I think that this Justice League is going to be worse than the theatrical cut. I think it'll be a more interesting watch, but as a film, there's very little doubt in my mind that it's going to be worse. Very little doubt. I cannot see it being good in any way, shape, or form. And, I know people are going to get angry at me about that, but that's truly what I believe. Zack Snyder is a very talented visual artist. He knows how to compose a scene. He can shoot the hell out of an action sequence. And he would make a really good cinematographer, if I'm being honest. But when it comes to directing, his direction is almost incomprehensible. He cannot direct a story. He can't tell a story to save his life. And I think Justice League if it's going to be a 4-hour-long experience, it's going to be a complete mess. You're going to have things like Cyborg's arc, Aquaman's arc. You're going to be tying in things like Iris West and Barry Allen, and then Darkseid and Apocalypse and Superman coming back. And I think all of these things in the hands of Zack Snyder does not give me a whole lot of hope that this is going to be a good movie. But you know what? Like I said, it's a very, very strange situation for me because I think there are a lot of negatives, and I think there's one really strong benefit, which is just basically artists' rights. And that's Zack Snyder getting to fulfill his vision, and I'm sure that it's going to offer him some sense of closure, which is great. And despite how I feel about Zack Snyder's work, my condolences do go out to him and his family about the death of his daughter, Autumn, because that is a cause that I can relate to. I can empathize with that. So I do empathize with Zack Snyder and his family on that issue. And I'm sorry that they had to go through that experience. So, that said, that's pretty much where I'm going to leave it, because the Snyder Cut, it did not exist in this pure form that his fans thought it did. It's going to be completely finished and kind of retooled into a movie that he's satisfied with. And I think it's going to be a very different movie, and I think it's going to be trying to completely wrap up the DC Extended Universe. What that's going to look like, I don't actually know. We will all find out together. And I think another thing that we have to take into consideration is the fact that this movie is never going to live up to the hype that his fans have propelled it to. His fans have shot this thing into the stratosphere with just the hashtag, a couple of stupid billboards during Comic-Con, and a banner on the back of a plane. I mean, Jesus Christ, man. They act like this movie is going to be the greatest film in cinematic history. They're talking like this thing is born from the, it's like the Song of the Muses to them. And the fact is, it's never going to live up to those expectations. And like I said, quite frankly, when it's worse than the theatrical cut, it's not going to matter because his fans have already made up their minds. It doesn't matter how bad the movie's going to be. They're going to think it's the greatest thing in the world. It's going to be pretty much critic-proof because they've already made up their minds. You cannot reason with them. And that is a whole different discussion in itself. Fandom toxicity, that is something that I am not going to talk about. If you want a good video about fandom toxicity, I suggest you go watch Jacob Bellow's video on that. He made a good video about fandom toxicity. I'm not going to go there because I don't need more people coming after my Twitter. But, it's never going to live up to those expectations. It's not going to be this magical movie that was sent down from the heavens. So it's a tough position. This movie has a lot riding on it, and like I said, regardless of how I feel about Snyder's work and his previous DC films, you can bet I'm gonna watch it day one. I have very little doubt that me and my friend Victor are gonna sit down and subject ourselves to a 4-hour cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League. So that's just how it is. There are a lot of negatives to this situation, but there are also some positives. And it creates a weird sense of ambivalence, and I'm not sure how to feel about it. But you know what? This is huge for the entertainment industry because of what's happening right now. Nothing is happening in the entertainment industry. We don't know when theaters are going to reopen. And when they do reopen, are people going to be comfortable going to the cinema? I don't know. Personally, I don't think I will. I am a diehard Christopher Nolan fan, and I can tell you something right now. I'm not going to risk getting COVID-19 just to watch Tenet. I don't care how excited I am for that movie. I'm not doing that. But the Snyder Cut, because it never really existed. Zack Snyder's Justice League coming to HBO Max is huge. This gives the entertainment world, the film industry, something to be excited about, regardless of whether or not you like his movies. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for watching, everybody. What do you think about the Snyder Cut? Do we need it? Are you excited for it? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to tell me how wrong I am, well, you know what? You can also do that in the comment section below. And also, I would just like to say, you know, like, share, subscribe, all that other YouTube jargon. It makes the algorithm happy. It makes me happy. It's a hot topic, so I'm sure it'll circulate somehow. So just go ahead and do the thing. And yeah, you know, if you completely thought that, you know, I was wrong, if you think I'm an idiot, you know, if you would just like to tell me that I am completely wrong about Zack Snyder's movies and I don't understand them because I'm just not smart enough, well, you know, go ahead and comment. Tell me that. You know, go ahead and do what you gotta do. In the meantime, I hope everybody is staying safe. Stay home, wash your hands, do not reopen California. Thank you for watching. May your heart be your guiding key, and good night. I'm going to go do some squats and deadlifts because that is all we're going to be doing until Zack Snyder's Justice League comes. Okay, but seriously, thank you for watching.